Hey everyone. Welcome back to the Built to Last show. I have a new friend and colleague of mine. Also, we have a really similar first name. I've got Meg Rentschler with us today. She is a veteran psychotherapist and coach with 35 plus years of experience. I was recently on her podcast and we had such a wonderful, super valuable conversation. And after that show, I said, Meg, we've got to have you on the Built to Last show. So, really excited to have you here with us.
I am so excited to be here, Megan. I think one of my very favorite things is when I connect with a guest, and often that's the case. I think and we say, we've got to continue this. Let's just flip shows. That is super valuable to me. Because also it just says that that synergy was there and I'd love to like meet your audience and be in front of your audience. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And something, one of the, I'll just kind of share with you. I'm almost like fangirling a little bit because I think that as coaches, I think that something that has happened along the years in the coaching industry is that it has turned into such a like this thing about building an online business and marketing and selling. And it's become less about really mastering the craft of coaching. And I just feel so honored to have you on the show because you are a true master of your craft and your vocation in the coaching space. Doesn't mean you don't market and sell yourself, but you are someone who really has put so much time, effort, and attention and practice into mastering your craft so that your clients are just getting really, really incredible results. So I'm excited to also like sit back and learn from you today, Meg.
Well, thank you, Megan. And I've got to say that, one of the things that I do on a regular basis, I teach in two coaching schools, but also I believe that if coaches or any entrepreneur, whatever you're doing in the world, if you shift focus completely into selling and getting business, which is I'm not discounting that because if you're not getting business, you're not able to do that thing that you're passionate about. But if we're not also paying attention to how are we getting better at whatever that service is that we're providing, whatever that thing is that we're doing, if we're sharpening our saw and being very intentional about that consistently, then our confidence is going to go out. Our competence is going to go out. And so we're going to be creating the kinds of results that people want to get. And therefore, that feeds into being able to be that successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally agree. I love that. Okay, before we get too far into our conversation, because we could just like roll with it, I would love for you to share a little bit about your backstory. I know that you started out as a psychotherapist, then I know that you moved into coaching and really added that into what you do. So I love hearing the like the story behind the business and how you
Mhm.
found psychotherapy and then how did you find coaching and what has that journey really looked like for you over the years?
Well, thank you for asking because we all have our own journey and we think it's interesting and whether other people think it's interesting or not, we're about to find out. But in that, I will say that my passion towards being a psychotherapist actually started when I was like 13 years old. I remember clearly sitting in the living room of my family's home in Michigan and reading this article about runaway children and just how dire situations were for so many and they were running away from something often. So I thought, oh, I want to work with kids to be able to problem solve and self-care and so I went on, got my master's in social work and began in the field of psychotherapy pretty quickly. I mean, like, by my mid 20s, I was had moved to Texas at that point with my husband and was working in a psychiatric hospital as a therapist, and then went into my own business in 1990. So sometime before some of you were even born, I went into private practice and loved it. Worked with children and their families. It sort of evolved to working with a lot of adults. A lot of employee assistance programs would refer to me. And then, Megan, I began to see, and I would encourage everybody who is a business owner, who is whatever your trade is, whatever the thing is that you're doing, pay attention to what's going on inside you and the messages that you're getting from the service that you're providing. And so the message that I began to get was people are coming to therapy. So many of the people in my practice were coming to therapy because their work environments were so dysfunctional, because
Wow.
they were being asked to be leaders, but not being given the tools to be leaders. I'm a great individual contributor. Now let's make you a leader. Well, I want to be a great leader, but I don't know how to be a leader. Or they were, there was a lot of people that were obviously being led by people who weren't sort of valuing the human spirit or what individual people were offering. So that began to wear me out. People wanted to be put on disability, or they didn't feel like they could continue to do whatever it was that they were doing. So we would do our therapy thing and we would dive into things. And yet I needed to pay attention to the fact that I started to wear down. I thought we're putting people back together again, sort of in their therapy sessions. They're going forward, they're coming back the next week, sort of in the same place. What could I do differently that would meet this need, but also pay attention to the spirit that was sort of struggling inside of me this was after 20 plus years of being a therapist. And so I started doing some research. I found executive coaching and thought, oh, what if I could go into organizations, work with their leaders, work with their people to create healthier work environments, to give them the skills they need to feel competent at this new thing that they're being asked to do. What what difference would that make? Now, that doesn't mean that therapy is not needed anymore. Therapy is a very useful conversation and very needed. I just needed to pay attention to the fact that it wasn't meeting. I didn't feel like I was meeting that space the same way. I needed to make a shift. And so I did. I shifted into executive coaching. Shortly thereafter, I got invited into the faculty of two programs. And so I kind of balance mentoring and growing coaches and their skills and helping executives be the best executives and leaders they can be. And that shift I needed because it just like reignited. You know how you get excited? I was so ignited as a new therapist and really for so many years, but I just needed to pay attention to what did I need to do differently. So that's my
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I really love that, and that you had the awareness that something just wasn't maybe as satisfying or as fulfilling as it once was, and then being guided into coaching it. That was somewhat similar to my story around being a high school teacher first. And,
Yes.
I left the teaching profession when we had our daughter Brighton 14 years ago and didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was my husband who suggested, "Hey, Megan, he actually suggested this not for me to become a coach, but to work on my own personal development." I went through a coaching, like a certified professional coach certification. My husband did it with me. He had already previously gone through it. And when I went through that, I thought, wow, this coaching thing, which I really didn't know a lot about it in 2011. I found it to be so similar to what I was doing in the classroom and on the tennis court, because I was also a women's tennis coach. I thought, wow, when you're working with 14 to 18-year-old kids and you're a teacher, it goes beyond standing at the front of the room and teaching a lesson. You're
Mhm.
mentoring, leading, facilitating, you're coaching. There's so many emotions going on. And I thought, wow, I could really take my skills as a teacher and facilitator,
Yes.
combine them now with my coaching skills, and I can coach people in my own coaching business. So really similar how we can take our skills from a previous career,
Yes.
previous training, and combine it with coaching. I think there are a lot of people in the industry who do that.
I agree. Being able to work with over 100 new coaches a year, people come into coaching from so many different walks of life. And often, anytime we start something new, it's almost like, oh, I'm new. And so it becomes like all this uncertainty versus, okay, yes, you're new at this place of your journey, but you've had all these miles of journey beforehand that indicate who and what you can be in the situation. So, I'm often saying to anybody who's sort of new at something, yes, you're new and you want to build this particular strength. However, what do your other strengths indicate for you? How do they help inform who you want to be? And so it's not like you just got born yesterday. There's all that, teaching experience you had and coaching experience and it just feeds into, and that's how come each one of us is just a little bit different at what we offer in whatever profession we're in.
Yeah, it's reminding me, I wrote a post yesterday. I did a video, I did a live training on this, and then I turned it into a post and I turned it into a carousel post. But it was about how do I decide between whether or not I'm going to be a private coach and stick to private coaching, or if I'm going to transition and offer group coaching. And it's really similar to what you just said. I think a lot of folks, when they get into the coaching space and we see, well, it looks like everybody making millions of dollars has these megawatt celebrity level group coaching programs. And a lot of coaches go into directions, whether it's offering groups or masterminds, memberships, courses, you name it, because they think that's what they have to do. And I always share with people, look, not everybody is cut out for or meant to coach coach groups of people and then also do the marketing and sales required to continue filling groups of people.
Right.
What's your skill set? Do you have the skill to lead a dynamic group of people? Do you have training skills, teaching skills, coaching, leader? You kind of have to do all of it when you're a group coach. And do
Right.
you love marketing? Because again, you've got to be a pretty good marketer in order to keep filling the group. There's more team involved. And then we look at private coaching. Private coaching, you could spread the word of mouth, referrals. You don't really have to be this great marketer. Do you really love the art of coaching and the purity of coaching? Do you want to pocket 90% of your profit or more with private coaching? I'm curious because you're working with so many coaches a year. How
Mhm.
do you see other coaches really struggling with, do I stick with one-on-one? Do I move to offering groups? And then sometimes I think people move to a group and then they decide and realize that's not what I want to do. I'm going to go back to just
Mhm.
working with people privately. I'm just curious with your years of experience, what do you see with people kind of deciding between which direction they're ultimately going to take their coaching business?
Such a good question. And I think that what I'm seeing is another thing in there as well, which is offering some kind of a digital course or product to
Yes.
go along with. So what I'm seeing is um, a couple different trends. First of all, coaches, I think, are more comfortable at first offering one-on-one, and that makes sense. It's like build your skills that way, build that curiosity muscle. Let go of the need to fix for everybody, because if you really haven't built the curiosity and the belief in the other person contributing at least 50% of what's going on because it's a partnership, then if you go into groups, you're going to be facilitating versus really coaching in groups. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with group facilitation. It's just because that's very needed, and there's not one discussion that's not an important discussion to have, but if you're going to group coach, have you really built your coaching muscles? So that's one thing. But the other, to get to that place of I see coaches wanting to leverage their time and their ability because there's only so many hours in the day. And if you are doing one-on-one, if and you're wanting to grow your business, you either need to increase your fees, which might happen, or figure out how to get more um, people into that same amount of time. And that's where sometimes offering some kind of a group program gives the participant usually a lower fee than one-on-one, um, and allows them to have some kind of a intervention with you or a group experience or coaching experience for a lesser fee. Now, we go to the fact that yes. So I've worked with wonderful coaches who have developed these awesome programs and don't get them out the door because they're chatter. I think that, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, Megan, but in my experience, the chatter increases of I can't do this, or I feel like an imposter, or who am I to offer this? More so if I'm offering something to many than one on one. It's like, yes, coaches struggle with who am I to sort of put myself out there, or to ask for to market myself is sort of what coaches believe, and I believe that you're marketing a result that you're offering. And it's not necessarily, I'm not selling Meg, I'm selling what the result of my coaching can bring. But if I'm doing that now, I'm creating a program or a group offering, and I'm telling many people, work with me to get this result. I think that that increases the fear factor and shuts coaches down more than I even see one on one. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, it does. I think it does. And
Hmm.
some of the phrases or thoughts or concerns that I will hear from folks is, it's almost like, well, okay, one is, what if I do all this work and I build it and I launch it, I do all the marketing for it, I spend all this time, weeks, and nobody joins, or only two people join, and does two people really make a group? So I think there's this fear of failure. Number
Hmm.
one, I think there's a fear of success and a fear of responsibility, added responsibility. And something that I've heard a lot of folks say, I started hearing this around 2021 and 2022. And I wonder if people started saying this because there was such a boom in the coaching industry with an influx of
Hmm.
new people joining. There was an influx of people buying programs because everybody's sitting at home. And I had a lot of actually colleagues who were sharing with me they wanted to scale back. They wanted to scale smaller because they would say things like, well, I don't want to have this big team. I don't want to run a big organization. I don't want to have a lot of people. And a lot of that to me as an observer and a listener was they didn't want the added responsibility that comes with leading more clients,
Mm.
having more fires to put out, leading more people on a team, having a bigger payroll, having more response. It's just more of everything.
More,
To be
more,
honest with
more.
you, yeah, the game doesn't really change. I mean, I've worked with people in the coaching and education space as large as 4,500 clients at a time. And that organization was doing 40 million plus a year, and I've worked with people who are just getting started and they've never made a sale. The problems don't really change, right? Like the people at 40 million, they are struggling with the exact same thing that a getting started person is struggling with in their mind. The biggest
Mhm.
difference is you just are making more money, you have more team, and you have more clients, and you have maybe bigger problems that are more expensive or that are going to
Right.
impact more people. But it's honestly a lot of the same mindset issues, no matter how much money someone's making. Um, and I think the other thing that I hear is it's like, what if I let my clients down? What if I have 20 people in my group? I know I can get one person a result, but if I have 20 people, what if I can't get them a result? They're mad at me, they're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm a fraud. And then oftentimes, what I will see, and this happened to me a little bit as well along the way, now you start almost bending over backwards for your clients. You're
Right.
crossing boundaries. You're creating codependency between your clients. You're doing the work for them. You're fixing them. You're telling them instead of really coaching them and letting them do the work because there's this fear that, well, now it's really up to me and I have to get them the result. And now it's a
Right.
lot of people that I have to get that result for. And then people overwork and then they want to not do it anymore.
Right. When I was just talking to a veteran coach recently about the determination whether to continue the year-long program that this coach has been doing for years, because there's just this pressure of everybody who signs up, because it tends to be a healthy investment. Is everybody going to bring their A game to the table as a client? Maybe, maybe not. Is everybody have the same? I mean, everybody has the potential, but are they able to maximize on that? Are they able to? And so then it becomes, like you said, anger or frustration or disappointment. And that's a lot to carry. Um, because very truthfully, it's sort of that third, third, third. Like a third are going to absolutely thrive, a third are going to do pretty well, and a third probably are not going to maximize on the program. And that always on the provider of the program, right? So
Mhm.
then it becomes, do I want to step into that space?
Mhm. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, as an industry, we do have a very low, completion rate of programs, even success rate of programs, whether it's done for you, not done for you, self-study courses, even in group
Mhm.
coaching programs. The success rate is not that high in our industry.
Mhm.
And again, you are privy to working with organizations that have hundreds of clients every single year. I'm curious your perspective on client results, client success, retention. You know, I think some people want to know, like, oh, your retention should be this percent, this amount. We should be
Right.
shooting for 60 or we should be shooting for 80. Or I've even heard people say, if you're not shooting for 100% client success rate or 100% retention, like, why are you even doing this? I've heard people say, retention is kind of this moving scale, right? Kind of to your point, if we look at the bell curve, some are going to be successful, some are not going to be successful, and then the people in the middle are going to be about average. I'm just curious your perspective on client success and client retention in coaching programs. How do you see it?
You know, I think that it's going to represent across whether it's coaching or a financial program or I mean the reality is human beings tend to either be super motivated or looking for a quick cure or I mean think about like the weight loss industry and how many people join gyms and want that quick result and then don't get it. So I in some ways I think the coaching industry just mirrors many industries across the board. But I also think that we are still as an industry trying to find the balance between being good at what we do, like that skill set that you were talking about, and really getting good at that client partnership, that client coach partnership, and not being clear about how we know what are the results that we get. What can we sort of like what can we invite people into, understanding that everybody is an individual. So until, over and over again, I have conversations with hundreds of coaches a year, right? So I hear either like people are really, really good at the skill thing, or they're really, really good at the marketing thing. And it's hard to kind of find somebody who is that phoenix that kind of does both, right? And so with that, I think that impacts what we offer and how we set up what we offer can also impact people's ability to be successful in that. Now,
Hmm.
I'll own, and I don't know about you, Megan, but I will own that over my many, many years of life, I have invested in things that I thought were just going to be awesome. And then not necessarily because the program wasn't awesome. I just lost motivation, I lost time, I whatever I did. So with that, I would say that um getting results or like helping people across the finish line is sort of a combination of how are we potentially getting super clear and the clarity that we need to offer as the service provider, but also kind of meeting people where they're at and understanding that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it to drink. Let's just change up all my analogies here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's a big I'm sure you see this too. It's a really big conversation in our industry, and I think you're right. I have spent a lot of years consulting behind the scenes, pretty large scale coaching and education companies. And just like you, I've bought a lot of things, and some of them I thrive in, and some of them I do not thrive in. I lose interest or I lose steam with it, or maybe in my mind I had a particular expectation of what I thought it was going to be, not necessarily based on what I was sold into, but whatever my mind, however I interpreted it. And
Exactly.
it didn't really end up being that way. I think that there are probably, I've never come across one personally, but there are probably some just horrendous programs out there. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's some awful coaches out there, but again, I've never come across one myself
Right.
personally. I've heard stories. But again, I think so much of the onus does really need to be on the individual client, on committing, showing up, being consistent. You know, Meg, if we just look at being successful in business or being a successful
Yeah.
coach, if you really boil it down to like, okay, how can I like make this work and make this last? Be consistent. Like,
Yes.
be consistent in your business. It's the same thing when you're a client in a program. You have to be a consistent member of the program, a consistent client in order for it to work for you, or it doesn't work. I'll tell you this, I had a client one time who shared with me, it was so interesting because it kind of gives you a glimpse into the mindset of the buyer. She said to me, she was in my program, and I think we were towards the end of the program. And she goes, your program is the first program out of all the ones I've purchased where I finally realized that just swiping my credit card and buying wasn't going to get me the result. And what she
Interesting.
meant by that is it's almost like this idea like, well, I made the decision and I'm sitting here on the calls absorbing, but what she wasn't doing is she wasn't doing. She wasn't turning around and taking the
Mhm.
consistent action required for her to actually get the education and the learning out in the field, to continue to grow and prosper. So I think so much of the onus really does have to be on the client.
Well, and to that point, as a service provider also, how are you vetting the people that you're bringing into your program? What
Yep.
are you promising, but what are you willing to turn away a potential client who just isn't a fit? Are you willing to say, this program's going to work if you do the work versus, yeah, we just want to fill our program. No, we want to fill our program with people who are invested in getting the results that they really want. And so maybe it becomes, how are we, inviting people in, and what's the conversation that we're having about what it's going to take to be successful in the program?
Yeah. Well, and letting people know that as early as the marketing and sales phase
Yes.
of the client journey, I
Yes.
think is so
Yes.
important. I think it's really important. Okay. I am really curious, what you have to say about this. So, I've been in the coaching space for about 13, 14 years. And it probably wasn't until the last 5 years, uh, yeah, last 5 years, where you really started to notice coaches and leaders in the coaching space exiting their businesses, shutting their businesses down, going on sabbatical, completely changing the way that they're operating in their business because of whatever they want to call it. Things like burnout, or I like do not like the way that I'm living my life and running my everyday life because it's literally being led by working so much in my business, or
Mhm.
kind of like what we were talking about earlier. There's a really big difference in building a group coaching based business model versus working with people privately one on one. One is solopreneur, do your thing. There's a lot of parts of a business you don't even really need to do versus building this big empire over here. It's a lot more work. There's a lot more bells and whistles. I'm curious how you coach people, in the executive leadership level or you're coaching clients. How do you coach them through that so that we are making decisions about running our businesses around our life so that people are really creating a lot more inner peace and leading from that place of groundedness and inner peace versus I'm just trying to keep up with the Joneses? Or I think a lot of us have have at some point fallen into the trap of like being very led by, well, I have to make a certain amount of money. And if I don't make this amount of money, XYZ, these are the consequences. And when we
Excuse me.
operate that way every single month, that really takes a toll on us. So, I would love for you to speak into this because we're seeing that a lot these days. Very
Mhm.
tired, burned out, unhappy business leaders in the industry.
So I think a couple things sort of came up for me while you were sharing that, in as much as one of the things I will share with any coach is that we are not our best when operating out of scarcity. So if in fact I have been let go from my business or decided to, retire or transition from a paid gig to a entrepreneurship, how am I setting things up in the way of systems and what I want to do and how I've begun to um, create flow so that when I'm doing it, it's not a daily uphill battle, exhausting. Am I going to get enough money to put food on the table? I mean, that's not attractive to anybody. That kind of energy is felt. And so, if we're in a business where we are serving other people, we need to attract them to us in whatever way. And a scarcity, scared energy does not attract anyone. So my first thing is always, what have you planned for? How have you potentially set up? It's not I'm going to flip this in 6 months and make my corporate salary in six. I mean, sometimes do people do that? Yes, but I'm not talking to the exception. I'm talking to sort of the overall pattern. And the pattern is, what have I done to create time to build what it is that I want to build? And then to your point, have I built what I really wanted to build? Have I built something because it was what was available to me? And very truthfully, Megan, do we not do that? I mean, sometimes we get an offer for something that's going to, provide income while we're getting that rhythm that maybe we do, but we ultimately don't want to do long term. So is that something that we're able, what's our exit plan for that? Like, are we really building something that lights us up, or are we building something that is an energy drain all the time? And if we've got that back energy drain, then what I coach people around is, what stops that leak? What is it that is creating the leak? And what would the difference look like? Whether it's somebody who's a leader, whether it's somebody who's in their own business, like we've all got leaks because just life happens. But if the flow of leak is like draining us every day, there's a reason for that. So what does the difference look like? And how scary is it to fill that gap? Like, what would it look like step by step to begin to turn that away from the very thing that is draining us? To me, coaches who leave their business because they're just drained, they haven't given themselves permission to take care of themselves. It's sort of like physician heal thyself first, right? Like, what is it that you teach your clients or work with your clients around? Are you doing those very same things for yourselves? How often does our own self-talk or our own belief systems, the stories that we're telling ourselves, just don't work for us and are depleting us every single day? So do we have the both the stamina and I think the courage to kind of look at what is that story and because this is the deal, Megan. In my belief, it doesn't always take like a huge shift to like go from something that a story that we're telling ourselves that doesn't work, or a pattern that we've created that drains us. What's the tweak? Sometimes it's just a tweak. And yet if I'm telling myself I've got to completely overhaul the whole thing, then I'm not going to overhaul it either. I'm going to like just keep doing it until I drop. So it's like slow down, and it's all made up. I'm sorry. Everything is
Oh,
made up. What we tell ourselves, it's
it's so
all
good.
made up. So why don't we just engage in some other stories? What else could be true?
Yeah.
what else could I experiment with? What's the smallest thing I could do to begin to shift the energy, to shift the focus? It's like it's got to be this big of a step. It's got to be huge. Well, if that's the case, are we going to do it? But what if I challenge you to think about what's the smallest thing you could think about differently, you could try, you could step into that might just make that just that little oomph that we can then begin to move our energy in another direction.
Yeah, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get a certain result for whatever reason, to be seen in a certain way, to feel important, to feel valued, or to feel worthy, or to feel like we are keeping up with whoever is ahead of us or we think is ahead of us. I'll share with you and with the listener, one of the reframes in my mind, or like stories, I guess, this was so helpful for me in my journey. I think in the earlier years, because look, like there are a lot of people who started coaching business. I mean, I started a coaching business. I had no money coming in, right? I had a teaching job. I left my teaching job. We're a one income household now. So it was kind of like a very pressurized way to start a business
Yes.
because I kind of felt like, oh, well, you have to make this work.
Right.
And that's a lot on any individual
Mhm.
who is doing something for the first time. And I was just sharing this with a client too. She asked me a question and it led me down this pathway of sharing with her, look, like not every single season is about your revenue. Not every single season in your business is about, let me do this so that I can make a lot of money. Sometimes it's about, this season is about mastering my craft as a coach. Sometimes this is about me getting my clients results this season and really figuring out what is going to lead to client results. Sometimes this season is about building relationships and your content and building that community who then is sometime in the future potentially going to become your client. When I started taking more of an iterative approach, even with launching group coaching programs, like start with a beta group. Your beta group is not
Yes.
meant to make you money. You're going to make a little bit because you'll charge a little something unless you do it for free. But the purpose of a beta group or your first like 5 pro bono one-on-one clients, the purpose
Yes.
is not to be making money. The purpose is to build relationships, provide the content and figure out what's going to work so that when it's time for you to unleash the next level of that offer, then it is something that is better than it was before, you know? So that was a reframe in my mind that really
Mhm.
helped me not get so caught up in I'm behind or
Right.
at any point in time, like I should be further along. Like who says who? Like says who really,
That
if we're
whole
here for the long
comparison
haul.
thing just comparison just zaps us. And I love even earlier you had mentioned like starting a group program and I only have 2 people, so I can't do it because I only have 2. And my whole thing is you've got 2 people, gift it to 3 more people
Mhm.
and run it and see what are the results I get. What do I need to tweak? What build your confidence in what because anytime it's just up here conceptually in our brain and it's not delivered and vetted and sort of all the bumps and the tweaks worked out. I mean, it's just like then it's a scary place to just live in our heads. I'm sorry. It just
Mhm.
it so that's part of and some of the most successful people that I have had the honor of meeting did those very things like their first groups were not filled they were not they were started at the same place where we all start. And then we look at them now and think, oh, Jeff Walker, Tony Robbins, Lisa Sessovic, whatever. We look at these
Yeah,
people and say, oh, they must always be successful. No,
right.
they had the same bumpy road. And so being able to be clear about the fact that roads are bumpy um, and we if we can kind of plan for that, like you said, in the way of seasons. And this is my season of beginning. This is my season of exploration and learning what works and what doesn't work, which is why we need to have some kind of a
Mhm.
at least permission to take the time to do that.
Yes. Yes, it really does. It takes the pressure off, right? It takes the pressure off of performing or producing or hitting a certain financial number, right? Or even, when you're doing a beta, if you're running a group coaching program, like start with the beta group. I remember when I started with one-on-one coaching, I coached, and the person who certified me, this was her direction to us when we finished. She goes, go find 5 people, don't charge them, do it completely pro bono, and do 6 sessions with all 5 of those people totally free. And that's what I did. So I didn't have so much pressure like, oh my gosh, like I have to get these people
Right.
results because they paid me all this money and they're going to be mad at me. So it really does take the pressure off of you when you approach
Mhm.
it in this way. I love that. I love that. Yeah. So I think where I want to land the plane, not that human connection and building relationships is anything new, but I do think that our world has kind of gotten, and especially the coaching industry as well, we've gotten to this place of being much more transactional than we are
Mm.
relational, whether it's with our clients or even with our teams. And you probably see that a lot with teams. I know I certainly see that in my consulting work because I'm working with businesses who have teams, and oftentimes I see a CEO or a leader who really isn't building a relationship, an individual relationship with each of their team members, or they're not cultivating this community based approach on the team or community culture on the team. I'm curious your thoughts on how we can get back to being more relational and building deeper connections with our clients and or our team versus being such a transactional, society is kind of almost like groomed us to be transactional versus relational.
Right.
So how can we get back to, I think, our own center around being more relational and building deeper connections with team and clients?
Megan, I think part of that is taking the stigma off of that. For some reason, it's like if it's touchy-feely or woo-woo or relational, that's somehow less than in connection and I don't get where that sort of happened, but that's the sense that I get, even teaching coaches, I'll hear things like, "Well, that's a feeling. That's not coaching, that's therapy." And I'll say, "Are you coaching robots or are you coaching human beings? Because there's going to be feelings involved in what we as human beings do." I think one of the things that is one of my very favorite things to do, but also that has just brought such incredible results towards that whole goal of let's make organizations healthier is I have the opportunity and really the honor of teaching hundreds, thousands of leaders how to use coaching techniques in their leadership. And so the key things there are let's be more relational by listening to one another. If you were to listen, if you were to ask 2 or 3 more questions before you jumped into giving the solution, which is often what leaders do, because I'm the leader, I'm here for a reason. You come to me with a question, I'm going to answer your question quickly and be on to the next thing. My challenge is if you challenge the other person to use their gray matter, to say to them, well, what specifically is it that you're trying to achieve? What have you tried already? What about this is important to you? What what could you potentially do differently that might get a different result? Like, spend a few minutes exploring and inviting them into the conversation. That person feels heard and seen and valued versus Megan comes to me, she gives me one sentence and I'm off to the races telling her how to solve whatever it is and she's thinking, "Yeah, I've already tried that," or you don't really understand what's important to me," or "I can't say anything cuz this is my boss and I'm just going to go off and try this even if this isn't sort of the direction that I or even what I was coming to you about." So, relational really involves building that curiosity muscle about, gosh, what is this person in front of me? What's important to them? What are they
Mm,
bringing? And how can I put aside my phone and my computer and my watch whatever's interrupting and just look at them and be curious about what is it that you're bringing to me and what can we do together versus me fixing you. And I think that that becomes whether we're a coach, whether we're a leader, whether we're a parent, whether we're a peer, whatever it is, people are not broken. People are not needing, I mean, there are people who need interventions of different things. There's no doubt about that. But as a whole, people are whole beings who have ideas and are there for a reason. So relationally, let's wonder about that. I think we all have our telling muscle is really, really
Mm,
built. It's pretty strong. We can tell
mhm.
people all sorts of things coming and going. That asking curiosity, I wonder, and being comfortable in the space of not knowing. Being comfortable that I'm going to ask you a question and I have no earthly idea what's going to come from you. But if I'm just in a place of being receiving of that and seeing what else that brings up for me in the way of curiosity and what we can explore rather than I have to fix it. I think we have way too many people carrying around all this responsibility that I need to fix the world. Well, you know
Yeah,
what? Let's do it together. I end every one of my episodes with we're all on this earth together. Let's do the heavy lifting together versus, minimizing or diminishing anybody. So that's
yeah.
a long answer to your question. I don't know if I went in the direction you were hoping, but that was kind of what came up for me.
I love that because you are exactly right. We have flexed the I need to fix it. I'm just going to tell you the answer. I need to have all the answers muscle. And I think oftentimes coaches do make themselves believe that in order to be seen as valuable to their paying clients, they have to have the answers. Meg, I've actually had clients say to me that we're in a $25,000 mastermind. Well, I expect you to have the answers for me because I hired you to give me the answers. And I'm like, I mean, sometimes I may have answers for you, but other times this is a co-creation. And I
Mhm.
love what you said about, I may not use the exact words, but you were saying it's like being okay and being comfortable sitting in this space of not knowing.
Mhm.
That's a because if you are curious enough and you ask enough questions, the answer will reveal itself. Even if the
Mhm.
answer is, let me go find out from Sally Joe, who I know could help you with this, and we'll get this,
Right.
situated, right? Um, that's a really beautiful place to lead from when you can do that. So I love that. I love kind of wrapping up on that note too. Yes.
Well, I loved my time with you. So thank you for allowing me to sit in this space with you because you're such a joy.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I know you've got a podcast. I was on your show and you mentioned it a couple of times here. Tell everyone about your podcast, the name of it, where they can find it, the types of episodes you have there, and then any other places where people can continue to learn from you. Please share that with us.
Thank you. So, my show is the Star Coach Show. That's an acronym for strategies, tools, and resources for coaches and leaders. We have shows about skill development, like we talked about. How are we going to continue to build our skills as really as people engaging with other people? How do we build businesses? And how do we as leaders lead more effectively? So I sort of have those three categories of shows. The Star Coach Show is on anywhere where you get podcasts on every platform, as well as our YouTube channel. So come on over and watch Megan talk to me on her incredible journey to be the superstar that she is. That is at Star Coach Show on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn at Meg Rentschler, but see, I know that that last name can be a little annoying. So Star Coach Show is just so much easier to find me at than that long German last name that I married into.
Oh, is that German? Really? My mom is German.
Yes, it is. I was a Fitzgerald growing up, and my boys, I have two boys who are delightful and young adults now. But when they were little, my oldest said to my husband, Dad, we've got Fitzgerald grandparents and we've got Rentschler grandparents. Why did we go with Rentschler?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so it was like, "Don't say that to Grandpa Rentschler."
Yes, let's not. Let's not. Wow, amazing. Well, this has been such a pleasure to have you. You're such a joy to have conversations with, and just such a wellspring of knowledge and experience that you shared with us today. So I appreciate you so much for being on the show with us today, Meg.
Well, thank you, Megan. You have an awesome day.
You too. And until next time, remember to design a life and business that's built to last.